Hello. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to use the Google Sheets version of the UMF calculator. Now, it should be noted that the original copy of this file was an Excel spreadsheet written by Matt Katz of the Ceramics Materials Workshop. I've taken that Excel spreadsheet and have converted it into a Google Sheet, added a couple of pieces. So if you're familiar with Matt Katz's Excel spreadsheet, many of these things will be familiar. I'm going to add a couple of other nuances about how Google Sheets has some other abilities that the Excel doesn't necessarily have. So the first thing I want to note is that when we open up this file, you will not be able to edit any of these. So what we need to do is I need to make a copy, sort of a local copy into my Google Drive. And if you're not familiar with Google Drive, I'll have another video that talks about how to use Google Drive. It's a very powerful tool in terms of organization. So I'm going to go to File, Make a Copy, and it's going to copy it into my Google Drive. And I want this particular set of recipes. These are for a blue semi-mat that I found online on Glazy. And so I'm going to call it my blue semi-mat, and I'm going to hit make a copy. And when it makes that copy, it'll probably pull up the README page, the testing ground. So I'm going to go over here to recipe number 1. So this is the recipe that I got, again, from Glazy. This is for a blue semi-mat. So I want to talk about first this part of our sheet, which is the ingredients list. Now, these highlighted in blue are the cells that we are going to change. We're going to manipulate these numbers. These columns over here are calculated from these columns. So we only are going to touch the numbers here in these light blue columns. In the material, so if we click on the cell, we are on this drop-down arrow, we get all of the possible choices of ingredients. So if I change this Custer feldspar just, to silicon carbide just for a second, you'll see that the columns over here will automatically update. So whatever is in this column is what's in this column and this column. Same thing with the numbers. So if we look at these amounts, many of you are familiar with glaze recipes where the base ingredients or the base glaze, those amounts add up to 100. And then the additives, the colorants, are above 100. That's sort of tradition, right? For when we're making these, to make it very simple and straightforward for us to think if we want to change relative percentages of something. Understand, though, that those are just a recipe, right? So a glaze recipe is literally just a recipe, kind of like a cookie recipe. So I have a cookie recipe that says I need this many cups of flour and this many cups of sugar and this amount of baking soda. If I take that cookie recipe and multiply all those ingredients by 2, the recipe doesn't really change. I'm just changing how much I'm putting into my batch of cookies. When we're doing glaze recipes, it's the same idea. It's the relative amounts that are important. So when you are putting in your initial amounts here, you want to be cognizant of what those numbers sort of like come from. And you can put in your traditional sort of like 100s, or you cannot. It makes no difference in terms of these numbers. So whatever your recipe source is, go ahead and put in that recipe. These 2 columns will automatically update. This column is default for a 100% batch. And this column is, let's say I'm happy with my recipe and I want to make a 200 or a 2,000 gram batch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the desired batch size. And in this cell here, I'm going to put 2,000 and I'm going to hit enter. And then all of these numbers will be updated. So if I want to make a 2,000 gram batch of this particular recipe, here is how much feldspar I need, how much flint I need, whiting, and all the particular ingredients. So this is like I said, this is a blue mat, right? So I titled the file blue semi-mat, but I'm actually going to tweak it. I'm going to make a couple of different variations on this. I want to change the titanium and the cobalt a little bit. Actually, and I'm also going to change the amount of feldspar that I put in just for another change. So I want to be very clear on my individual recipes. Staying organized is one of the powers of Google Sheets, organized in our recipes. So I'm going to go up here to the title, and I'm actually going to put, and it should go right next to the date, I'm going to put the original, my original blue semi matte. And I'm also going to label my sheets. So if I click on this down arrow, I can rename that. I'm going to put Orig Blue Semi Matte. And that will become important in a little bit. So if I have multiple of these recipes, I can remember it's just like, oh yeah, this is the original, right? And I have the title here as original. Those are two separate labels. So now what I want to do is I want to make another recipe that's very similar to this, but slightly different. I want to double the cobalt, for example. So I'm going to highlight all of those cells, and I want to copy and paste them over to another one of these sheets. So I'm going to highlight those all, and I'm going to hit Control-C on my computer, or Apple C if you're an Apple, or you can right-click, copy. Depending on your computer, there's different ways. So I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to go over here to the second tab. And you'll see that, I have a bunch of zeros. And I'm going to click in the upper left-hand corner of my blue range. And I'm going to hit Control-V, or right-click, paste, or Apple V for paste. And now you see I've pasted in the same recipe. So it is the same as the original blue semi-matte is now in column 2. All right. So I need to rename this. So this is going to be my 4%. So I'm going to rename this, I'm going to rename it just CO-4 because I'm going to change the cobalt carbonate concentration to 4. So in my title up here, I'm going to call that the cobalt 4. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to change this amount to 4. All right, so I'm doubling the amount of cobalt. In our spreadsheet, if we look up here, we have all of these numbers that are calculated in our particular recipe. So you have all of the numbers that, all the sort of like the ratios that you are familiar with if you understand basic glaze chemistry. So the ratio of the silicon to aluminum is important. Our ratio of the alkali metals to the alkaline earths is important. And then there's, of course, the Stull map, right? So you'll notice that there are 2 different dots in my Stull map. There's a red dot and there's a yellow dot. This is because of Matt's most recent version. So traditionally, if you will, it is the ratio of silicon to aluminum. Right? So silicon 2.05 to aluminum 0.44. What Matt has figured out is that depending on the other additives and how they behave, it might affect or believed to affect the amount of aluminum in the overall glaze. And so he has also calculated this sort of like updated, if you will, amount of aluminum oxide. So this is sort of like a collective, what he calls a collective. So the 2 dots on this Stull map, represent the 2 different numbers that you get depending on how you do the calculation. So the red dot over here is where the silicon to the old school, if you will, aluminum oxide is. And then the yellow dot over here is where the silicon to the new sort of like updated, slightly teaked aluminum value is. I'm not going to speak to the validity of that. I'm just making sure that you understand why you're going to see sort of 2 different dots. Again, we have all of these calculations of the ratios, the magnesium and the calcium and the barium and all of those things. And those be important as you are tweaking your glazes, especially when we are wanting to change certain amounts to adjust our glazes, which is will be covered in a different video. So let's do one more variation. So again, I'm going to go back to my original. I'm going to hit Control C for copy. I'm going to go over here to number 3. Hit Control V for paste. Let's see. Let's make the titanium dioxide. Let's double that amount. So titanium dioxide. So I'm going to rename this titanium 10. Hit enter. Go up here. Titanium 10. Again, that's just what I'm calling it. It updates my amounts, and I go over to my stall map, and I'm like, yep, okay, I like that location. All right, so now I have 3 different recipes. I have the original blue-green or blue semi-matte. I have the one that I changed to cobalt 4, and I have the one that I changed to titanium 10. So here's one of the other powers of this tool, is that I can sort of like look at these all together. So if I go to the collective maps and I go over here, I see I've got 3 different dots, right? I have 3 different dots for my 3 different glazes. And I've also got it telling me sort of like which one is which. So there's my original blue semi-matte, there's my cobalt 4, there's my titanium 10. Now again, these titles are only being populated here because I was good about labeling each individual recipe. Again, keeping organized and keeping things well labeled is going to save you a lot of heartache in the end. The other cool thing is if I go all the way over here to collective formula, is I can see all of my recipes all on one sort of piece of paper. So here is my original BSM, again, because I labeled my recipe under that tab, the original BSM. And so there is that particular recipe, and then here's my cobalt 4, and then here's my titanium. Now you'll notice that the cobalt 4 does not have that 4 there, because what is going on here is the recipe that is being put on this piece of paper is this last one, right? Which is hey, we're actually going to make a batch of this, and I need to know the relative amounts of everything, right? So this 4 was just a number, for me, right? When I'm looking at relative amounts or my original recipe, the number that goes on that last page is our batch size. So you'll notice here that I upped the desired batch size for, again, we're the cobalt 4. I upped it to 300, so you see that there's 100 grams of the custard. So if I go to the collective formulas, here I am, the custard feldspar, again, is 100. So whatever batch size I put in the individual tab is the batch size that they're going to give me in this collective formula. So what's great about this is I can sit here and I can, while I'm at home or when I've got time at work and I'm on lunch break, I can sit here and tweak all of my recipes, and then it's just like, oh, okay, tonight when I have an opportunity to go and make all of my glazes, here are all my recipes in this one nice document. Now, what's really cool about using Google Sheets is that you have access to it wherever you have your phone or any old computer, right? So unlike Excel, I don't have to have the program downloaded to my machine. This is a web page. And if it's a web page, I can access it from anything that can sort of like look at the web. So I can look at this on my phone. So if I forget the piece of paper, I can pull up this spreadsheet on my phone and look at it. I can also, while looking at the spreadsheet on my phone, I can adjust the numbers as need be. So if I am I'm making my glazes and I want to on the fly realize that, oh my gosh, it wasn't 10 that I wanted, it was 8 that I wanted. My phone will then automatically change my batch size and will change all those particular numbers. As always, if you have questions or comments or suggestions about these tutorials or any questions about the spreadsheet in general, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is up here in the upper right-hand corner. Good luck.